The sun had already started to dip behind the line of trees when she finally left the hospital. Her shift had stretched longer than usual and her feet ached from standing all day. She loved her job, but there were days when it drained her completely. The smell of disinfectant still clung to her clothes as she walked toward her car, parked under the soft yellow light of the hospital lot. She was thinking of nothing more than getting home, taking a shower, and maybe eating the sandwich she had forgotten in her bag hours ago. The road was quiet as she drove through the small town. It wasn't the kind of place where much happened, just a handful of shops, a few gas stations, and people who all seemed to know one another. She rolled the window down slightly, letting the cool air brush her face. It was peaceful, and for a few moments she felt the heaviness of the day lift off her shoulders. Halfway home, her fuel light blinked on. She sighed, pulling into a small gas station she often passed but rarely stopped at. The sky was a mix of orange and blue now, that soft hour before dusk. She parked near one of the pumps, filled her tank, and went inside to pay. The clerk greeted her with a tired smile, the same one he probably gave everyone. Everything felt normal, quiet, simple, uneventful. As she stepped out, something faint reached her ears. At first, she thought it was just a sound from one of the nearby cars, maybe a squeaky fan belt or a radio. But as she walked closer to her car, the noise grew clearer. It was a cry, a baby's cry. She stopped, trying to find where it was coming from. Then she saw it, an old gray sedan parked a few spaces away. Inside in the back seat, a baby was strapped into a car seat. The little face was red from crying, small fists clenched, tears rolling down soft cheeks. The windows were rolled up tight and the air inside the car looked heavy. She froze for a moment, unsure what to do. She looked around, expecting someone to appear. Maybe a parent returning with a pack of diapers or a bottle of milk. But there was no one. Just silence except for the muffled cries. She walked closer, cupped her hands against the glass, and saw the baby squirming, struggling to breathe in the heat trapped inside. Her heart started to race. She checked the door handle. It was locked. She looked around again, hoping to spot the owner. No one was there. A couple of cars passed on the road, but none stopped. The station clerk was inside, busy restocking shelves. She knocked on the car window, calling out, "Hello? Anyone here?" But there was no answer. A minute passed. Then another. The baby's cries grew weaker. Sweat had started to collect on the child's forehead. Her chest tightened. She pulled out her phone and dialed the police, quickly explaining the situation. The operator assured her help was on the way, but as she hung up, she looked at the baby again, its tiny hands slowing, the sound fading into soft whimpers. She felt something deep inside her twist painfully. She knew what heat could do to a baby's body. Every second mattered. She tried to reason with herself. Wait for the police, don't interfere, don't cause trouble. But her heart was already making the decision her mind was scared to make. She looked around, found a small metal rod near a trash can, and in one quick motion, she hit the car's window. The glass cracked. Another hit and it shattered. She reached in, unlocked the door, and gently lifted the baby out. The air that escaped was hot, suffocating. The baby's skin was flushed, tiny chest rising and falling too fast. She held the baby close, whispering softly, trying to calm the little one down. She moved to a shaded area near the store and fanned the child with her hand, checking for signs of distress. Slowly, the cries grew softer until the baby was breathing normally again. She wrapped her scarf around the child to protect it from the evening breeze. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air. A police car pulled up, followed by an ambulance. She explained everything, her voice trembling as she recounted what happened. The paramedics took the baby, checked vitals, and nodded approvingly. The baby was going to be okay. Relief washed over her, but only for a moment. The officer turned to her and asked sharply, "Did you break this window?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I had to." "The baby—" "That's someone's private property," the officer interrupted, jotting notes on his pad. "You can't just break into a car." Her stomach dropped. She tried to explain, but her words felt small compared to the uniformed man's authority. The officer said they'd need to take her statement back at the station. The paramedics drove off with the baby, and she stood there, hands trembling, staring at the broken glass on the ground. Inside the station, she was asked question after question. Why she didn't wait longer, why she didn't try to find the parent inside the store, whether she had any personal connection to the baby. Each question made her feel smaller, like her act of compassion had suddenly turned into a crime. After what felt like hours, she was allowed to leave, but not without a warning that an investigation might follow. The words echoed in her mind as she drove home in silence. The night outside was dark now, and so was the weight pressing on her chest. The next morning, her story was already spreading. Someone at the gas station had filmed part of the scene, the moment she broke the car window and lifted the baby out. It had been posted online, and by morning, it had thousands of views. Some people called her a hero. Others called her reckless. At the hospital, whispers followed her through the hallways. Some co-workers smiled with quiet admiration. Others avoided her, worried about the attention. Her supervisor called her into the office, face serious. "You're suspended for now," he said softly, "until we know how this plays out." She sat there, stunned. "I saved a baby," she said, voice cracking. "You're suspending me for that?" "It's not about that," he replied carefully. "It's about the protocol. The police have questions. We can't have the hospital involved until it's cleared up." She nodded slowly, not trusting herself to speak. She gathered her things and left quietly. Outside, the air felt colder than usual. Over the next few days, she stayed home, unable to shake the feeling that doing the right thing had somehow become the wrong one. She replayed that moment over and over in her head. The baby's cries, the silence that followed, the glass breaking, the officer's sharp tone. She had no regrets, but the cost of that decision was heavier than she expected. Reporters showed up at her door once asking for comments. She refused to speak. Online, strangers debated her actions as if they were part of a movie. Some praised her bravery. Others said she should have waited. The world had opinions, but none of them truly understood how it felt to see a life fading right in front of you. A week later, she received a call from the police. They informed her that the baby's mother had been found unconscious inside the nearby store that same evening. She had collapsed due to exhaustion and low blood sugar. When she woke up, she was frantic, terrified to learn her baby had been taken to the hospital. The officers said the mother wanted to meet her once things settled. For the first time in days, she felt her chest loosen a little. At least now there was a face, a story behind that child. That night she sat by her window looking at the quiet street outside. Streetlights flickered softly, and the sound of crickets filled the space between her thoughts. She wondered about that baby, whether he was sleeping peacefully now, wrapped in a blanket somewhere warm. She wondered if his mother hated her or would understand what she did. In the middle of all the noise and judgment, she found a quiet truth inside herself. She hadn't acted to be seen as brave or kind. She had acted because she couldn't stand still when a life was in danger. It was that simple. Even if the world misunderstood her, even if her career suffered, even if people talked behind her back, she knew she'd do it all over again. Because sometimes doing the right thing doesn't come with applause or easy rewards. Sometimes it just leaves you standing in silence, hoping the life you saved will one day understand why you risked everything for a stranger. The following weeks were not easy for her. What started as a brave act soon became a shadow that followed her everywhere. People in town whispered when she walked by. Some smiled in quiet support, but others looked away as if she had done something shameful. The hospital where she had spent years helping others had suspended her, and now every day felt longer than the one before. At home, the silence was heavy. She tried to distract herself with small things, watering her plants, cleaning the kitchen, watching old shows, but her thoughts always drifted back to that night at the gas station. She could still hear the sound of glass breaking, the baby's cries, the siren in the distance. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape the memory. Then, one afternoon, there was a knock at her door. She hesitated for a moment before opening it. A woman stood there holding a small basket of flowers. Her eyes looked tired, as if she hadn't slept much, but there was kindness in them. "Are you the one who rescued my baby?" the woman asked softly. She froze. Her heart skipped. "Yes, I suppose I am," she said, uncertain how to respond. The woman's eyes filled with tears. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "I wanted to meet you. I didn't know what to say before. I was scared. I fainted that day in the store, and when I woke up, they told me someone had taken my baby out of the car. I panicked. But then I learned what happened, what you did." The two women stood there in silence for a moment. Then the woman placed the basket in her hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "If you hadn't done what you did, my baby might not be here today." She invited her inside. The air between them felt strange at first, heavy with emotion but warm at the same time. They sat at the small kitchen table. The mother, who introduced herself only as Lydia, explained everything. That day she had been rushing between 2 jobs. She hadn't eaten properly, hadn't slept in nearly 2 days. She had left her baby in the car for what she thought would be just a minute to grab some groceries. But then her vision blurred, and she collapsed. She had no idea how long she'd been unconscious until she woke up in the hospital. The woman listened quietly. There was no anger in her, only deep sadness for what Lydia had been through. "You were doing your best," she said gently. "Sometimes life pushes us so hard that we don't even realize we've reached our limit." Lydia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't deserve your kindness," she said. "You risked everything for my child, and I couldn't even thank you properly." For the first time in weeks, she felt a kind of peace. All the doubts that had haunted her started to fade. The world had judged her, but the one person who truly mattered understood. Over the next few weeks, the 2 women began to talk more often. Lydia would call just to share updates about her baby, who was recovering well. She learned the baby's name and felt warmth fill her chest whenever she heard it. Sometimes they'd meet for coffee at a small cafe in town, sitting by the window while the baby slept peacefully in a stroller beside them. But beneath the surface of these simple moments, there were still challenges. The hospital investigation wasn't over. She received letters, phone calls, and requests to attend meetings. There was talk about whether she had violated protocol by breaking into the car. Some people even questioned if she had acted out of attention-seeking motives. Each accusation felt like a small cut. She tried to stay calm through it all, telling herself that truth would speak louder than anything else. But it wasn't easy. Bills were piling up, and being suspended without pay meant she had to live on her savings. There were days when she thought of giving up her nursing career completely. One morning, she received a call from the hospital board. They wanted her to appear before a disciplinary committee to discuss her actions and their consequences. Her stomach twisted at the thought. That night, she couldn't sleep. She walked around her small apartment, replaying every moment of that evening again. When the day came, she walked into the meeting room, trying to steady her breathing. 5 people sat behind a long table. The air was tense. They asked her question after question, about her training, about why she hadn't waited for authorities, about whether she understood the risks of what she'd done. She answered honestly. "I knew there would be consequences," she said quietly. "But I also knew there was a baby in that car who might not survive if I waited. I didn't think about rules. I thought about saving a life." The room was silent for a moment. Some of the faces softened. Others stayed cold and unreadable. When the meeting ended, they told her they'd reach a decision later. She walked out feeling drained, unsure what would come next. Days turned into weeks. Lydia stayed in touch, always offering words of comfort. One evening, Lydia called and said, "There's something I need to tell you. The doctors found something with the baby's heart. They said it's a rare condition." Her voice broke slightly. "If you hadn't rescued him that day, they might not have found it in time." The news hit her like a wave. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Then she whispered, "He's going to be okay, right?" "The doctors think so," Lydia replied, her tone shaky but hopeful. "They're planning treatment. But I'm scared. I don't have much money and the hospital bills." Her voice trailed off. She promised to help in any way she could. That night, she stayed up searching for information about the condition, calling a few of her old colleagues who worked in pediatrics, asking for advice and connections. Even though she was suspended, her instinct to care for others hadn't faded. Over the next few days, she helped Lydia make appointments, fill out forms, and find a specialist who agreed to see the baby for free. She even went with them to the hospital one morning, holding the baby while Lydia spoke to the doctors. When the doctor listened to the baby's heartbeat, he smiled faintly and said, "You got lucky. It's good this was caught early." The word stayed with her. Lucky. Maybe. There really was something like destiny, something that had pushed her to act that evening when everyone else might have walked away. Still, the struggle wasn't over. The hospital finally sent a letter with their decision. They decided to extend her suspension until further notice. No pay, no work, no clear end in sight. She sat on her couch reading the letter in silence. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. She just felt empty. That evening, Lydia showed up at her door again, holding the baby in her arms. She looked nervous. "I heard about your suspension," she said softly. "I'm so sorry." "You don't deserve this," she smiled weakly. "It's okay. Maybe it's just how things are meant to be for now." Lydia shook her head. "No, you don't deserve to be punished for saving my child." Before she could respond, Lydia placed an envelope on the table. "I've been trying to collect some money. It's not much, but maybe it can help until things get better." She was shocked. "No, I can't take this," she said immediately. "Please," Lydia insisted, her eyes full of tears. "You helped me when I had nothing. Let me do this for you." She hesitated, then reached out and took Lydia's hand instead of the envelope. "Just promise me you'll take care of him," she said softly, looking at the sleeping baby. "That's all I need." Lydia nodded, her voice breaking. "I promise." That night after they left, she sat by her window again, watching the city lights shimmer faintly in the distance. The world outside seemed calm, but inside her, emotions swirled like a storm. She had lost her job, her peace, and maybe even her reputation. But she had gained something that couldn't be measured. A strange, invisible bond with a small life she had saved without knowing why. Sometimes, late at night, she would imagine the baby growing up, running, laughing, living the kind of life that almost never happened. And in those moments, she felt something deeper than sadness or regret. She felt purpose. She didn't know what the future held. The investigation wasn't over, and her career might never be the same. But when she closed her eyes, she could still hear that soft cry from the car that night, the one that had changed everything. And no matter how much the world judged her, she knew in her heart she had done what was right. Because sometimes, real courage doesn't look like a grand act. It looks like an ordinary person who refuses to walk away. Days turned into months, and life quietly moved on, though not for her in the way she hoped. Her suspension from the hospital stretched longer than she ever expected. There was still no clear answer from the review board, and the silence from them made her more anxious each day. Sometimes she wondered if they had simply forgotten about her. Other times she feared that they hadn't, that they were just waiting to decide her fate. Still, she tried to keep herself busy. She volunteered at a small community clinic, helping elderly patients check their blood pressure, giving advice on basic care, and assisting with local health camps. It didn't pay much, but it gave her purpose. And in those small acts of kindness, she felt pieces of her old self returning. Every few days she received calls from the young mother, whose baby she had saved. Their friendship had grown stronger since that first visit. The baby, now a little more active and full of life, had become a small light in her days. The laughter she heard through the phone reminded her that what she did mattered, no matter what the world said. One afternoon, the mother called again, her voice a little shaky. "I need to tell you something," she said. "We went for another checkup today. The doctors confirmed the heart condition is serious. They said surgery might be needed soon." Her heart sank. "Is there any good news?" she asked gently. "They said if we act quickly, the chances are good. But the cost is high." "More than I can manage," the mother whispered. There was a long pause on the line. She wanted to say something comforting, but words felt small against the weight of what the other woman was feeling. Finally, she said, "We'll find a way. Don't lose hope." That night she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking of that small baby, the one she had pulled out of that hot car months ago. She remembered the little hand clutching her finger, the faint cry that had faded into silence, and then the soft sigh when the baby had finally calmed down in her arms. She couldn't forget it. She decided to help, not out of pity, but out of something deeper. The bond between her and that child wasn't made by blood or family, but by a moment of choice. She had risked everything to save that life once, and she wasn't about to give up now. She opened her laptop and began writing. Her idea was simple, a fundraising campaign to help pay for the baby's surgery. She didn't mention names or details that could draw attention. Instead, she told a story of a child who needed a chance to live and a mother who had already been through too much. She didn't even sign her name. She just wrote, "Someone who cares." She spent nights reaching out to people online, sharing the campaign with anyone who would listen. A few friends she trusted helped spread the word quietly. Slowly, small donations began to come in, $10 here, $20 there. Each one felt like a spark of hope, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. The hospital bills were steep and time was running out. So she went further. She sold a few of her old belongings. Jewelry she no longer wore, some furniture she didn't need. She even took on night shifts at a local pharmacy to earn a bit more. Every penny she earned went into that fund. Weeks passed and the campaign started gaining attention. Local people began sharing it on social media. A few even recognized the connection to the baby from that old news story, though she never confirmed it. One morning, she received a call from the baby's mother. Her voice was trembling but full of emotion. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "Someone told me about a campaign. The donations, and they've reached almost half the amount we need. Who would do something like that?" She stayed silent for a moment, not wanting to reveal herself. "There are still good people out there," she said softly. "Sometimes they appear when you least expect them." The mother laughed through her tears. "I wish I could hug whoever started it." When she hung up, she smiled to herself. That was enough. She didn't need recognition. She just wanted the baby to live. But life has a way of testing even the purest intentions. A few days later, she received a call from her old hospital's administration office. The voice on the line sounded stern. "We've been informed that you've been involved in a public fundraising campaign related to one of our former patients. Is that true?" Her stomach dropped. "I haven't used any names," she said quickly. "I've just been helping someone privately." "Regardless," the voice said, "you're still under investigation, and engaging in public medical-related activity could be seen as a violation of policy." The call ended with a warning. If she continued, her suspension could become permanent. She hung up, her hands shaking. That night, she sat at her desk staring at her computer screen. The donation page was still open. Messages from strangers filled the comments section. Prayers, words of hope, small notes of love. She thought about closing it down, about walking away to save what was left of her career. But then she thought about the baby. The tiny chest rising and falling. The way he had clutched her finger that night in the gas station. She clicked share again. Days later, the goal was finally reached. The money was enough for the surgery. The baby was admitted to the hospital, and she spent the entire night waiting for an update. She didn't go to the hospital, afraid her presence might cause trouble, but her heart was there. Early the next morning, her phone rang. It was Lydia, crying and laughing at the same time. "The surgery was a success," she said between sobs. "He's going to be okay." Tears filled her eyes. "Thank God," she whispered. "That's all that matters." Lydia paused. "There's something else. I found out it was you. The fundraising, the messages, it was all you, wasn't it?" She didn't answer right away, but she didn't deny it either. "You would have done the same if it were me," she said finally. "No," Lydia said softly. "Not everyone would. You've lost so much because of me. I'll never forget this for as long as I live." That moment was quiet but powerful. Two lives that had collided by chance were now bound by gratitude and love. After the surgery, the baby's recovery was slow but steady. Lydia often sent photos, the baby smiling, holding a small toy, learning to sit up. Each one made her smile. Still, she couldn't shake the uncertainty about her own life. The hospital had stopped responding to her emails. Her suspension letter sat on her table like a constant reminder of everything she'd lost. But even with that emptiness, she didn't feel regret. Sometimes she would walk by the same gas station in the evenings. She'd stand there for a moment watching cars pass by and think about how everything had started in that exact spot, how a single moment of courage could change so many lives. One day she received a letter in the mail. It was from the hospital. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The words were polite but cold. "After review, your employment will not be reinstated. We thank you for your service." For a moment, she just stood there in silence, holding the paper. Then she placed it on the table, took a deep breath, and smiled faintly. Maybe this was the end of one chapter, but it didn't have to be the end of her story. Later that evening, Lydia called again. Her voice was bright this time. "The doctor says he's recovering faster than expected. They think he'll live a normal life." "That's wonderful," she said, trying to sound cheerful. "And," Lydia added after a pause, "I want you to come by tomorrow. There's something I want to show you." She hesitated. "What is it?" "You'll see," Lydia said with a small laugh. "Just promise you'll come." She agreed. That night she couldn't help but feel curious. She didn't know what awaited her the next day, but a small spark of hope lit inside her chest again, the kind she hadn't felt in a long time. As she lay in bed, she thought about everything that had happened. The night she saved the baby, The days of judgment, the kindness of strangers, the sacrifices she'd made. It had all been painful, yes, but it had also been meaningful. Maybe destiny didn't reward people with money or fame. Maybe it rewarded them with peace, with second chances, with new beginnings that came quietly, disguised as ordinary days. And deep down, she knew that tomorrow might be one of those days. The next morning came with soft sunlight filtering through her curtains. She hadn't slept much, her mind restless with curiosity about why the young mother wanted her to visit. She got ready quietly, put on a plain blue shirt, tied her hair back, and stepped out into the cool morning air. The streets were calm, children walking to school, small shops opening for the day. It felt like any other morning, yet something inside her said this one would be different. When she reached the small apartment where the mother lived, she was greeted with a warm smile and the sound of the baby's laughter filling the air. The sight immediately softened her heart. The baby had grown since she'd last seen him. Chubbier cheeks, brighter eyes, tiny fingers reaching curiously toward her. She bent down and smiled. "You're getting stronger every day, aren't you?" The mother laughed gently. "He's been full of energy since the surgery. It's like he knows he's been given another chance." They sat together in the small living room, sunlight spilling through the curtains. There were a few toys scattered around, and the faint smell of baby powder filled the air. For a few moments, they talked about simple things: the baby's new habits, his first attempts at crawling, and the way he had started recognizing faces. Then the mother stood and walked over to a small table. She picked up an envelope and placed it in her guest's hands. "What's this?" she asked softly. "Please open it," the mother said with a small smile. Inside were a few photographs. At first she didn't understand, but then she saw it. A picture of the baby lying peacefully in the hospital bed after surgery, surrounded by doctors and nurses. On the wall behind him was a board with the words "Guardian Fund, Successful." Below it, someone had written, "A stranger's kindness can save a life." She looked up, eyes misty. "You kept all this?" "I wanted you to see it," the mother said. "Because of you, my son has a future, and because of what you did, I learned what real kindness means. I'll never be able to repay you, but I wanted you to know how much it changed us." The words filled the room with quiet emotion. She smiled faintly, holding the photo close. "You don't owe me anything. I'm just glad he's healthy. That's all I ever wanted." The mother hesitated, then said, "There's something else. I spoke to the hospital director last week. I told him the full story. About you, the rescue, the fundraising. He didn't know how much you had done. I wanted him to hear it from me." Her heart skipped. "You talked to him? What did he say?" "He said he wants to meet you," the mother replied. He was surprised, I think. Shocked that the woman everyone accused had done so much good quietly. For a moment she didn't know what to feel: hope, fear, or disbelief. She had long given up expecting fairness from the hospital. But now, for the first time in months, there was a faint possibility that things could change. 2 days later, she walked through the hospital doors for the first time in nearly half a year. The familiar smell of disinfectant and the quiet echo of footsteps in the hallway brought back a rush of memories. She had spent years in these halls helping people, comforting families, fighting for patients who couldn't fight for themselves. It had once been her world. The director's office was on the top floor. She knocked lightly, and a calm voice told her to enter. The man behind the desk looked older than she remembered, his face kind but serious. He gestured for her to sit. "I've heard a lot about you," he began, his tone measured. "And I've also heard what happened after you left here." She nodded quietly. "I understand the hospital had its rules. I never wanted to cause trouble." He leaned forward slightly. "You broke a car window that day. You acted against protocol. But sometimes, rules can't measure the value of what someone does." Her eyes lifted slowly. "I spoke to the child's mother," he continued. "I saw the fundraising page, the letters from the doctors who treated the baby. You didn't do it for attention. You did it because you cared. That kind of heart is rare, and it's exactly what we need more of in this profession." For the first time in months, she felt her chest loosen. "Are you saying—" "I can't undo what's been done," he said gently. "But I can make it right moving forward. We'd like you to return, on one condition, that you join our new pediatric outreach program. We're building it for children who can't afford treatment. I think you're the right person to lead it." Her hands trembled slightly. She hadn't expected this. After all the silence, all the months of waiting, those words felt like light breaking through clouds. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. I won't let you down." When she stepped out of the office, the hallway looked different. The same walls, the same floors, but everything felt lighter, brighter. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she belonged again. Over the next few weeks, she threw herself into her new work. The outreach program began small, just a few children from low-income families. But soon it grew. She visited schools, clinics, and shelters, meeting children who needed care but couldn't get it. She organized free checkups, arranged for treatments, and made sure no child was left unseen. The baby she had once saved became the quiet inspiration behind everything she did. Whenever she felt tired, she thought of his smile, his laughter, and the way his mother had looked at her that morning with tears of gratitude. It reminded her that one act of courage can ripple far beyond what we imagine. But destiny, it seemed, wasn't done surprising her. One afternoon, months later, the hospital held a small event to celebrate the success of the outreach program. Families who had received help were invited, along with staff and donors. The hall was filled with balloons and cheerful chatter. She stood quietly near the side, watching children play and laugh. The sound of life, the sound she loved most. Then she noticed Lydia walking in, carrying the baby in her arms. The sight made her heart swell. She hadn't seen them in a while, and now the little boy looked healthier than ever. Cheeks full, eyes bright, his tiny hands waving at everyone. Lydia walked straight to her and hugged her tightly. "I wouldn't miss this for the world," she said. "He's walking now, you know. And he's saying a few words too." The baby reached for her, babbling softly. She lifted him up and felt his small hands touch her face. It was such a simple moment, yet it felt like everything had come full circle. Before she could say anything, the hospital director stepped up to the stage. He spoke about the outreach program, about the children they had helped and the people who had made it possible. Then he said something that caught her completely off guard. "There's someone here who reminds us all why we do what we do," he said. Her kindness began a chain of hope that continues to grow. Today, we're proud to name our new pediatric wing after her, a symbol of compassion and courage. The room erupted into applause. She stood frozen, eyes wide, unable to speak. Lydia turned to her with a tearful smile. "You deserve this more than anyone." On the wall behind the stage, a small sign was unveiled. It read, "The Hope Center, dedicated to those who never turn away." Her name was written beneath it. In that moment, she felt tears fill her eyes. The baby clapped his hands, laughing without understanding, but somehow it felt like he did. After the ceremony, people came to congratulate her, colleagues, patients, even strangers. But the moment that stayed in her heart was when Lydia whispered, "Destiny found a way to thank you." That evening, when the crowd had gone and the lights in the hall dimmed, she sat alone for a few minutes. She looked at the sign again and thought about how far everything had come. From that night at the gas station to this quiet moment of peace. She realized destiny didn't reward her with riches or fame. It rewarded her with meaning. It gave her back the very thing she thought she'd lost, and her purpose. As she left the building, the sun was setting again, just like that night so long ago. But this time, instead of exhaustion or fear, she felt calm. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she no longer walked it alone. Somewhere in the distance, a baby's laughter echoed softly. The same sound that had once saved her as much as she had saved him. And as she walked home, she smiled, whispering to herself, maybe sometimes, the reward for risking everything is finding out who you really are. The weeks after the ceremony brought a sense of calm she hadn't felt in a very long time. Life had finally found its balance again. The hospital had given her new responsibilities, but it didn't feel like work. It felt like purpose. Every morning she walked through those glass doors with quiet gratitude, ready to help whoever needed her. Her days were filled with the gentle hum of hospital life, the beeping of monitors, the soft shuffle of nurses, the occasional cry of a child, and the laughter that followed when someone got better. Each sound was a small reminder of why she had fought so hard to come back. But even in peace, memories lingered. Sometimes she still thought of that night by the roadside. The sound of rain hitting the glass, the fear in the young mother's voice, the weight of the baby in her arms. It all came back to her in flashes. Only now those memories didn't haunt her. They guided her. One day she received a letter. It was simple, written on plain white paper. The return address wasn't familiar, but she opened it anyway. Inside was a short note and a small photograph. The note read, "You don't know me, but my daughter was treated in your program. The doctor said she wouldn't have survived without the help we received. Thank you for being there, even for people you've never met." Below the note was a photo of a little girl, no older than 4, smiling with missing front teeth and holding a tiny teddy bear. She sat there quietly, holding the photo for a long time. There were hundreds of stories like this now, people whose lives had changed in ways she might never know. She realized that her act of kindness that night had become something bigger, something that had spread from one person to another, like ripples in a calm lake. That afternoon, she pinned the photo on the notice board in her small office. Soon more pictures joined it. Children, families, thank you notes, even hand-drawn cards made with crayons. Each one told a story of hope. One evening, while finishing paperwork, she heard a small knock on her door. When she looked up, she saw a familiar face. It was the baby's mother, holding her now toddler son by the hand. He had grown so much. Tiny sneakers, bright, curious eyes, and that same laugh she would never forget. He held a small paper bag and ran up to her desk, placing it proudly in front of her. "Open it," he said in his tiny, excited voice. Inside was a handmade bracelet, beads strung together unevenly with a small charm in the center shaped like a heart. It looked clumsy, but it was perfect. The mother smiled. "He made it himself," she said softly. "He said it's for the lady who gave him a second chance." For a moment she couldn't speak. Her throat tightened as she held the bracelet gently. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "I'll wear it every day." And she did. From that day on, she never took it off. It became a quiet reminder of everything that had happened. Every struggle, every doubt, every moment when she almost gave up but didn't. Months passed, and the outreach program expanded to nearby towns. She began traveling every week, visiting places where hospitals were few and families often went without proper care. It was exhausting at times, long bus rides, sleepless nights, but every tired moment was worth it when she saw a child smile again. One afternoon, she arrived at a small village clinic that had been struggling to operate. The building was old, with cracked walls and little equipment. But there were dozens of parents waiting outside with their children, hopeful faces that reminded her of why she started this journey. She spent the entire day helping, examining children, arranging supplies, training volunteers. When evening came, she sat on the clinic steps watching the sunset over the fields. A soft breeze passed, carrying the laughter of children playing nearby. A local nurse sat beside her and said quietly, "You've changed this place. People here talk about you like your family." She smiled gently. "I'm not special. I just do what anyone should." The nurse shook her head. "Not everyone does what you did. You took risks most people would avoid. But because you did, others learned to care again." The words stayed with her all night. On the way back to the city, she thought about destiny, how strange it was that one act of courage had led her here. She hadn't planned it. She didn't even think she was brave that night. She had simply followed what felt right. And maybe that was all destiny ever needed, a single moment where someone chooses kindness over fear. A year later, the outreach program had grown into a full foundation. The hospital had partnered with other institutions and more doctors joined her mission. There were now hundreds of children receiving care every month. At the foundation's anniversary event, she stood quietly near the stage, once again surrounded by families and colleagues. The baby she had saved, now a cheerful little boy, was running around with a balloon, laughing loudly. His mother caught her eye from across the room and smiled, that same grateful smile she'd worn the day they first met. When it was her turn to speak, she took a deep breath and looked at the faces around her. "I used to think destiny was something that just happened to us," she began softly. "But I've learned that sometimes destiny is a door that waits for us to open it. That night when I saw a child in danger, I didn't know what would follow. I didn't think about the risks or what people would say. I just couldn't walk away. And maybe that's what we all need to remember, that a single moment of courage can change not just one life, but many." The hall was silent for a moment, then filled with applause. After the event ended, she went outside for some fresh air. The night sky was clear, the stars bright and quiet above the city. She looked down at the bracelet on her wrist, the one made of uneven beads, and smiled. Just then the hospital director joined her. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "sometimes I think you were meant to find that baby that night." She nodded. "Maybe he found me," she said softly. He smiled. Either way, destiny chose well. In the years that followed, her story spread quietly, not through news or headlines, but through people. One family told another, one nurse told her students, one mother shared it with her child. Her name became a symbol of compassion, not fame, but love. She never sought recognition, but life rewarded her in ways that mattered most. Every child she helped was a reminder of that night. Every smile a small piece of the same miracle that had begun on a dark roadside years ago. One morning, as she prepared for another outreach trip, she stopped by her old neighborhood. The streets were the same, narrow, lined with little shops and noisy vendors. But there was one small difference. Near the corner where the gas station once stood, there was now a small playground. She watched children running, laughing, swinging on bright metal frames, and then she saw it. A small plaque near the entrance. It read, "For the woman who stopped that night and showed us that kindness can change everything." She stood there quietly for a long while. A warm breeze brushed past her, carrying the sound of children's laughter. She didn't need to cry this time. The tears that had once been of pain were now replaced with peace. A little girl ran up to her, offering a flower. "Here, miss," the child said shyly. "Mama says you made this park possible." She knelt, smiling softly as she took the flower. "Tell your mama she's the one who made it beautiful." As she walked away, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing everything in gold. She felt a deep calm settle in her heart. Life had tested her, but it had also embraced her. She had risked everything for someone she didn't know, and in return, life had given her meaning that no money or title could ever buy. That night, as she packed her bag for the journey ahead, she looked once more at the bracelet on her wrist. Some of the beads had faded, a few were loose, but it still held strong, just like her. She whispered quietly to herself, "It was never about saving a life. It was about finding mine." Then she smiled, turned off the light, and stepped forward into another day, ready as always to answer when destiny called again. Years passed quietly after the night she found the playground plaque. Life had settled into a rhythm that felt peaceful. She had grown older, though her spirit remained full of energy. The outreach foundation she built had turned into a respected program across several cities. People who once came seeking help were now part of her team, giving back with the same kindness they had once received. Every morning still began the same way, a walk through the hospital garden before sunrise. She would pause by the small fountain, watching ripples form and fade. That simple sight always reminded her of how one action could touch countless lives. She didn't need reminders of her story. The faces she met every day were enough. Sometimes she received letters from young doctors or nurses who had read about her quiet work. They wrote about wanting to help others, about how her courage inspired them to follow their hearts instead of fear. She always smiled reading those words, never feeling like a hero, just grateful that her mistakes, her pain, and her choices had meant something real. One spring morning, while reviewing reports at her desk, she received a call that made her pause. The voice on the other end belonged to the hospital director. "We're organizing a reunion," he said. "A gathering for all the families helped through the foundation. We'd love for you to come." She hesitated for a moment, then said yes. The day of the reunion arrived with golden sunlight and laughter filling the hospital courtyard. Colorful balloons danced in the wind. Tables were lined with snacks and drinks, and children ran around wearing bright ribbons. It was a celebration of life, something she never took for granted. She walked slowly through the crowd, her familiar bracelet glinting faintly in the light. Some parents came up to thank her. Others introduced her to the children she'd once helped when they were infants. She smiled at each story, her heart swelling quietly. Then she heard a familiar voice behind her. There she is. She turned and saw the young mother she'd once rescued standing with her son, now almost 10 years old. He looked strong, confident, and healthy. His eyes sparkled the same way they had the first time she saw him. He ran up and hugged her tightly. "I've been waiting to see you," he said. She laughed softly, holding him close. "Look at you. You've grown taller than I imagined. He grinned proudly. I started playing soccer. Mom says you'd be proud. I am, she said, her voice warm. More than you know. The mother smiled too, her eyes filled with gratitude that never faded through the years. He wanted to give you something, she said, handing her a small folded piece of paper. When she opened it, she found a hand-drawn picture. In the center was a woman holding a baby beneath a rainbow. The words below read, "You saved me when I was small. I'll save others when I'm big." Her throat tightened as she looked at the drawing. "This is beautiful," she whispered. The boy nodded. "When I grow up, I want to be a doctor, just like you." Those words echoed in her mind long after he ran off to play with the other kids. It was a simple sentence, yet it carried the weight of everything she had lived for. The circle was complete. Kindness had found its way forward again. As the evening sun dipped low, she stood near the edge of the courtyard, watching families laugh and talk. The air was warm and the sound of joy filled the space. It was everything she had once dreamed of when the world had seemed dark and uncertain. The director approached her with a gentle smile. "You've done something remarkable," he said. "This place, these people, they're your legacy." She looked around and said quietly, "It's not mine alone. Everyone who believed in this, who helped, who cared, it belongs to them too." He nodded. "Still, none of it would have begun without you." She smiled faintly, looking at the boy playing nearby. Maybe, but maybe destiny just needed someone to take the first step. That night, after everyone left, she stayed behind for a while. The courtyard was empty now, lit by the soft glow of string lights. She walked slowly across the grass and sat on one of the benches, listening to the distant sounds of the city. In the quiet, she thought about her younger self, the woman who had once stood in the rain, afraid yet unwilling to walk away. She wondered what that woman would think if she could see all this now. Probably, she thought, she'd smile. A few days later, she received another letter, this one from a school. It was an invitation to speak at a youth event about compassion and courage. She rarely accepted public talks, preferring to work quietly, but something about this invitation felt right. When the day came, she stood on the small auditorium stage, facing a room full of students. Their eager faces reminded her of the future, all that potential waiting to be guided. She began softly. "I wasn't always brave," she said. "There was a time I was afraid of what people would say, of breaking rules, of making mistakes. But life taught me something. When someone's in danger, when a heart calls for help, the right choice is often the hardest one. And if you follow it, it changes everything." She told them the story, not about herself, but about a night when a stranger saved a baby, about how that act changed lives. She never mentioned her own name. She didn't need to. The story itself was enough. When she finished, the students stood and applauded. One of them raised her hand and asked, "Do you think destiny rewards everyone who does good?" She smiled thoughtfully. "Not always the way we expect. Sometimes destiny rewards us not with what we want, but with what we need. Peace, purpose, and the strength to keep doing what's right." After the event, she walked outside feeling lighter. The sun was setting again, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. As she looked at the horizon, she thought of all the people she'd met, the children, the mothers, the families who had crossed her path. Each one had taught her something about love, courage, and the quiet power of doing good without expecting anything in return. That night, she returned home and placed the drawing the boy had made on her desk. The little rainbow above the woman and baby seemed to glow faintly in the lamplight. It was a reminder that hope never fades. It just finds new forms, new hearts to live in. Years continued to pass. She retired from the hospital eventually, though she still volunteered when she could. The foundation was now led by a new generation, many of them inspired by her. She didn't mind stepping back. She had always believed that true success meant creating something that could continue without you.